we're slouching. I'm getting a little comfortable here. So what's up?
You can slouch all you. I tend to sort of sit up.
Hello, Ryan. What's up, man?
Slouch. I better say hello. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. We hope you're all doing very well midweek, and the weather outside is rather nice. I had shorts and a vest top on today, which I'm not apologising for. You need to take the chance when you get it, So tonight we have a special show for you for two reasons. First reason is we have back on we're very fortunate to call these gentlemen close friends. We have the CRA co-owners, Mr. David J. Espinosa and Mr. Craig Arhens. Good evening, guys.
Hello.
It's been some time since we had you on. Craig and David are responsible for films such as Demon Fighter, The Crumbs, Love and Quality, all which I've seen and I can highly recommend. Very, absolutely amazing films. So that's the first reason. Second reason is tonight we are going to be chatting about a Scottish legend, basically, a patriot, a hero, Sir William Wallace, a man who lived and breathed Scotland, who fought for Scotland's independence, evening, Laura, and who changed the course of Scottish history for good. Basically, a man who, to his very dying breath, fought for independence for Scotland. So Craig and David are very interested in this gentleman, and so tonight we are going to be chatting about him. We do have another guest coming in. He should be in a couple of minutes. If he's not here, I'm going to follow up with him because he promised me he'd be coming in. But anyway, I tell you guys, what have you guys been up to over there? What's been happening?
Well, right now we are between projects. David has written a script, Satan's Crossing, which is very time-held. David can touch on that. And of course, we have the 4 films that are out there. As far as being viewable in the UK, the best platform would be YouTube, India Rights Movies. You can also Google it; it will pop up. So that's kind of the immediate. But the project that we are excited about is what David wrote, Satan's Crossing.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a wee sneaky background to that, David?
Yeah, I can give you a little sneaky background. Demon Fighter, we introduced a character called Father Michael. He's the lead character in it. Well, we rebirthed him. He's back again, and now he's down at the border. What goes on at the border is a lot of horrible things right now, not just in trafficking people, but in harvesting human organs there and other parts of the world. This film touches on those. Well, it doesn't touch on those issues. It is about those issues. And it takes place down there. We're very excited about it. It's action-packed. We're looking to some different background people, different actors. We're trying to look for people like Michael Pena, get him involved in something like this. We think it's right. Danny Trejo, other actors. It's just one of those scripts that just comes alive. Mm-hmm. We feel good about it, and of course the way we work, it's written in stone. If somebody in the middle of doing this had a better idea, we would jump on it. But for now, we feel really good about it. It's called Satan's Crossing, and we're working on pushing that come to fruition.
I look forward to it. It's crazy. You've got 4 movies already out, and they've all done exceptionally well, and as I said before, the two of you just seem to gel, work-wise. You seem to, no doubt you have your moments when you disagree. I think everybody does, but on the whole package, you tend to, you do work well as a team, as it's, Shane as well and the rest of the CRA team. It's just like one big family. I think that comes out through the movies as well. Not just talking to you, obviously I've spoke to quite a few, your team and actors, what have you, But seeing it in the movies, how well the movies are put together, you can tell it's a good team. Does that make sense? I know what I'm trying to say. You know.
No, absolutely, and thank you for that. We take it as a compliment, huh, Craig?
Yes, absolutely we do.
Yeah, organization is key to success in anything, because in the process of organization, you'll find mistakes you can correct. You know, it's about the project. It's not about you. When you take yourself out of it, despite the fact that so much of you is into it, if you can remove your ego for a minute, because Craig and I are pretty blunt with each other about what we do and how we do it. If I don't like something, I'll say it. If he don't like something, he'll say it.
That's the best way to be. Our guest has arrived, so I want to introduce you to Gary Stewart from the Society of William Wallace. There he's there. Gary is a good friend of ours, and he'll be working.
Hi,
Hey there,
Gary.
boys. How you doing?
Wallace Stewart. Gary, this is Mr. David Espinosa and Mr. Craig Arhens.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you, Gary.
Nice to meet you, lad. Sorry about this. I'm on my iPad thing, so I'm usually on my computer, but my wife's not great, so I can't use that. So if I keep bouncing about, I don't know what's happening here, but you can't really see me quite well. How you doing? Okay.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So these two, thanks for coming in, Gary. Always a pleasure to talk to you, bud. Always a pleasure. So these two gentlemen are very interested in William Wallace. So as I said to them, I was bringing you on because, you know, obviously, I said we know a bit about William Wallace, but we're no way experts. And it would be a disrespect to your two guests and to Wallace himself if I sat here and just rhymed off stuff that was probably historically incorrect, you know, inaccurate and stuff, which is likely to happen at some point. So that's how I brought in the big guns. So I think
me.
yeah.
All right. Okay.
Well, I've met him in real life. He's actually quite small, but he's about
Look
4
behind me there. Look behind me there in case there was somebody else shouting.
He's only about 4'2" in real life, but you know, that's it.
Aye.
So, William Wallace, I think as soon as you mention William Wallace, everybody thinks of the film Braveheart. I think
Yeah.
the first thing that comes to mind. I've seen Braveheart, I don't know how many times, dozens, and it is a great film. You know, I do love the film, but a lot of it was historically incorrect. Am I right?
I mean, it is, but I think probably what annoys me with how people talk about Braveheart is it's inaccurate, it's this, it's that, whatever else. But before Braveheart, I'd probably say 25-30% of the Scottish population knew who he was. People around the world didn't have a clue who he was. David R. Ross, it was our ex-convener who obviously sadly passed away. I mean, David's book after Braveheart came out was the second in the Scottish charts, which was On the Trail of William Wallace. So Braveheart for me, I've got no issues with Braveheart. In conjunction from the history side, yeah, don't get me wrong, I wish it was a little bit more historically accurate, but it wasn't. People still went out in Scotland around the world and bought books on like William Wallace. So for me, the film brought William Wallace to the world. As such. Now, historically wise, yeah, it's not right, but people did go out to read the true story of William Wallace. And even from our point of view, when we used to go to schools or else we did talks on William Wallace, yeah, you know, the first part of your composition was having to go into who William Wallace was and all the rest of it. After Braveheart, we didn't need to know, we didn't need to do that part. Everybody knew who he was. And it was then a matter of going, well, actually, that part of the film is not right. That part's not right. This is the true story. I know one of our friends, Ted Christopher, which you've met, Scott, did a song, and it's basically called "Where's the river mell, because there's obviously not a bridge in the actual Battle of Stirling Bridge, which seems a bit stupid because it is the Battle of Stirling Bridge as such. You know what I mean? And he did send an email to see what his thoughts was. I don't think he got a reply back, in fairness. But I was fortunate years ago to meet, and he explained the situation with regards to the bridge. And what he said is it was too dangerous for them to actually do a film with horses, a bridge, and men there, and the whole works, and do it in conjunction with what happened in 1297. So that's why the bridge is not there. The princess bit, yeah, the princess was about 7 or 8 at the time, so that bit's not right. But then it's a Hollywood film. You need the romantic side of things in there to get that going. It's what Hollywood does. I've not got an issue with that as such. You know, at the end of the day, the film was a massive film, brought sort of Wallace to the stage in conjunction with that. I mean, I don't know what David or Craig think, but I mean, I've got no issues with the film at all, to be honest.
I have a question for you. I really appreciate your perspective relative to the film, and given the fact that the majority of Scotsmen had no clue who William Wallace was until the film came out. Given that, do you think that the audience in Scotland, not here, would have received it the same way if they shown Sir William Wallace for the knight and the person that he actually was? Or do you think that making him a commoner, which the film did, was, and of course it was purposeful, but was designed to attract more of the common people, otherwise saying, oh, that's just the nobleman doing that thing, so what?
In fairness to William Wallace, I mean, yeah, he wasn't a commoner as such. I mean, from Wallace's point of view, he was trained to be a monk. And we should never have heard of him. You know, basically, bottom line, we should never know who William Wallace was. In conjunction with, he wasn't a commoner as such, but then in saying that, he was a knight, but he wasn't part of the establishment, if that makes sense. Like, he wasn't a clan chief as such. He wasn't a king. And in Scotland at that time, you know, the only person that you fought for basically was if the king said, right, we're going to war, then you go, right, okay, where are we meeting up, if that makes sense? Or like a clan chief said, right, come on, we're going to fight them, or you know, we're going to join this. Wallace wasn't, although he wasn't a commoner, he was a knight, but he wasn't that ranking that people should have when to fight for him, if that makes sense. So I think, in conjunction with that, I think from the Scottish people's point of view, I think that's why Wallace is more looked at in a different esteem to maybe like sort of Bonnie Prince Charlie or King Robert the Bruce or like the Jacobites, that sort of thing. Because, you know, for them to say, you know, whether you agreed with the king or whether you didn't, if the king said fight, you went, right, okay, let's go. Where is it we're going? And the same with the clan chief as well. You didn't really have a choice whether you agreed with the battle or what you were fighting for. That's what you did. Whereas from Wallace's point of view, to do what he did, I think then shows you more of the man that he was. And I mean, Scott and me spoke about this the last time that I was in a chat with him with regards to Wallace. Is it, yeah, we know he was a great fighter. We know he was massive. But I think because of the fact that he got a whole country to rise up to William Wallace, where you really should, that's not how things worked, basically, in Scotland in that time. It shows you that of what type of person he was. He must have been like a charismatic person. He must have been able to get people's like juices going, I suppose, you know, in a speech that people going, yeah, you know, let's go for that, rather than going, the king said fight, let's fight. I don't think the film made him so much like a commoner as such. I don't think, obviously, they you know, whether it was a commoner or a knight, again, I mean, I can talk about that we've been involved in would tell you that that he was a commoner.
I wasn't necessarily looking at whether he was or wasn't. What I'm interested in is whether you think he was received easier as one as opposed to the other by the audience. Let me give you an example. In the United States, here in America, obviously we are a nation of commoners, okay, from everywhere. And we come here. And so it's the low guy who makes well on the American dream rises up. So we like to see that. We like to see the grassroots guy come up and win. Well, he is more appealing that way to the audience here than he would be if he's a knight who's fighting for the justice of Scotland. And don't get me wrong, all that's great. That's what he should do. And he's heroic, and everything about him is absolutely true. He's an amazing human being with what he did and what he put up with. But I'm talking about films, and I'm talking about how audiences perceive films, okay? Because as you said, nobody knew Wallace until the film presented him. So was it a biased presentation? Of course it was. They made him fighting for love, and they made him coming from a mud hut that could barely sustain itself on its own land. And he had some issues, but his uncle came to save him. And I always wondered about his uncle in the movie. He's this massive man who just knows all these languages, and he's educated, and he knows how to fight. And when he must be of nobility. So I was wondering why that character, and I always think of it in terms of characters' influence on the audience's mind and their interaction with others.
I think the bit there, David, that I was saying that Wallace was trained to be a monk. That's how he could speak the languages that he spoke.
No, but in the movie.
Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry.
Now, remember, nobody knew about him. Yeah. I'm going from your initial statement. Nobody knew about him until the movie. So that's what they think now. That he's the movie.
But the thing which I find very good with the actual movie itself is knowing the history side of Wallace, and you know that he could speak the languages.
Yeah.
I think the way they did it in the film, where I think he's in a tent with the English guy and the princess at the time, and the English guy speaks to him in the princess in French, I think it is.
Yes.
And Wallace answers the question in French.
Yes.
And the guy just looked at him as if to say, how the heck can you speak? How do you understand that? You know what I mean? It's like, what's happening here? You're just this guy. You should know that. So I thought that was clever within the film that they got that bit in, that he wasn't like an idiot, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think from the Scottish guys, I think from the Scottish people point of view, as I said, I don't know from America's point of view how your history is taught as such. So I can tell you, I'm 57 years of age. Okay, so I was at school a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, me too.
I never get taught anything about Scottish history. I get taught zero. Okay, I can tell you about the Battle of Hastings, which Scott will probably know, which is an English battle in 1066. And I know I did a talk at an old folks home, pre-COVID, so it's about five years ago now. And they're all about 70 odd, 75, 80. And I started off by saying, can anybody tell me when the Battle of Hastings was? Right, this is English, by the way. This is nothing to do with Scotland. When was the Battle of Hastings? Every single person's like that. 1066. When's the Battle of Bannockburn? I mean, that's sort of Robert the Bruce, and that's in 1314. But they didn't know, because we weren't taught that at school. So a lot of the guys that watched this film, I don't even think it's down to the fact that Wallace was a commoner, or whether he was a knight, or whether he was a king, or whatever. I don't really think, David, that came into it. I think it was more the fact of, how do we not know about this guy? How do we not know what he did and what he fought for and all the rest of it? So I think it was a lot of opening of the Scottish people, of a part of history, with somebody who should be their greatest hero that nobody knew about. I mean, and I think it's funny when you look at films, because obviously you go with word of mouth. So Wallace was, in that time, Blind Harry was going around about telling stories, and he was getting like William Wallace's name going about with the stories that he was telling. You then came out like with books, and Blind Harry then came out with his epic poem to do with the life and times of William Wallace. Now that book to this day is the second biggest selling book in Scotland, second only to the Bible.
Wow.
And then obviously this day and age now, books are maybe not as important, and films are the way to go, if that makes sense. So Braveheart was like Blind Harry's book in like the 20th century, if that makes sense.
Sure.
You know, to get it out to the actual people themselves. And I think, I mean, to me, one thing to me, although Wallace was a knight and he wasn't a commoner, he was still basically the same as one of us. I mean, I'm not part of, I'm not part of royalty. I'm not part of, I'm not a head of a clan chief or anything like that. And if I say fight, people will look at me as if I'm stupid. You know what I mean? And whereas in Wallace's time, he said fight, and because of the charismatic person that he was and how tall he was, he must have imposed himself with regards to his feelings and his beliefs. And then people stood back and go, actually, this guy's a good guy, and he is just like one of us. So I think from that point of view, I think from the Scottish people, to a point of what you're saying, David, yeah, he's a wee bit like one of us rather than royalty or like a clan chief.
Sure.
He's like one of us doing it, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what made him favorable to the public at large, because his theme, his purpose is common. The freedom of people. Liberty.
Yeah.
You straight. I mean, there's nothing to discuss here. It's not a big issue. It's straightforward, and him pursuing those is what made it great.
It is. I mean, I've done podcasts in Australia, in America as well with regards to the film. And one of the major reasons the film is so good is every country has a William Wallace.
Well, our country doesn't necessarily have a Wallace. The United States was more like Longshanks, going everywhere and collecting other people's properties. So we didn't really do a Wallace.
But most countries have somebody in their history to do with Wallace, and you know, like Australia with Ned, you know, with the guys that they had, sort of Jesse James, or whatever people can relate to that, if that makes sense, from their own, from their own countries' sort of points of view. So I think that's why Wallace as a film became huge. I think from the history side of things, in conjunction with it, if it was done by a Scottish person that wrote the screenplay and whatever else, but then saying that, a Scottish person had the chances to do it, and not one Scottish person ever wrote a screenplay to it. Mel Gibson put the cash up for it, which nobody else was willing to do. So if it wasn't for the likes of Mel Gibson or sort of Randall Wallace doing what they did, we would never have had Braveheart. You know, I mean, Scotland, obviously, as you're aware, is part of the United Kingdom. It's sort of run by Westminster. I try not to get involved with politics, but politics and Wallace do intertwine a little bit, really, which doesn't help our cause, because we do try and stay out of that side of things. They didn't want made, basically, bottom line, because they didn't want. I mean, I know for a fact that people walked out of the cinema screaming freedom and sort of wanted to invade again. Do you know what I mean? It was that sense of pride in your country, and that got those feelings going. And that's one of the reasons why they didn't want the film done. And I know before the 2000 referendum, it's a TV documentary, or not a documentary, sorry, it's like a series called Outlander.
Outlander.
Yeah, which is to do with the Jacobites.
I just saw Outlander, and I also saw there is a documentary on William Wallace right now out on Netflix, and it's quite good. I've seen that as well. I think the subject matter is extremely interesting, and from another perspective too, because as you know, we're filmmakers, and most of our films are based on historical events, something that actually occurred. And this is so ripe for paranormal. And I was talking with Scott. I said, gosh, I could see are there paranormal sightings, activities, anything of that nature that's ever been documented relative to William Wallace?
I've not seen any with Wallace. I know Glencoe, which was the massacre of Glencoe. I mean, I've been there, done commemorations there. Culloden as well, which I've been there. I think I've made a speech there. In fairness, we do like a midnight service, and there's something there. There's definitely in those two places. It's like it's hard to describe, but it's like an eerie feeling. When you're there, something.
Yeah, there's a real negative energy.
Yeah, very much so. And I know when we were there, I'm going back years ago now, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and we do like a midnight service the night before the battle, and we had like your torches that you get, you wrap round in petrol, and you set it like so you can't switch them off until they burn out. And one of my friends was doing his talk, and basically what he said was, I'd like to think that the boys that died on this day know that 700 odd years later or whatever, we still remember them. And there was five torches there, and every torch went out. And then came back on about a second later. You can't switch these things off. Do you know what I mean? You can't. It's just a physical impossibility. And we were all sitting like that, going, "What just happened there?" So yeah, these two places. With Wallace, there isn't really anything like Smithfield's quite open as such. It's not inside. And there was that much that happened down there with the amount of murders that took place down there as well. But I've never. That's the only two places, David, that I've actually felt not a presence. That's not the right word, but something, an atmosphere there that when you walk on the field, you go, oh, this is eerie. And that's the only two places that I've ever got it.
I know.
Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Dave. Obviously, we're in various paranormal groups and what have you, and excuse me, people have reported, that they're picked up on the spirit of William Wallace at different locations. Stirling Bridge. It seems to be the sort of famous locations, locations that he was famous for. But whether these are true, I'm no disrespect to the teams, who have stated whether they're true or not, we don't know. But there have been a couple of reports in Glasgow as well that people picked up on the spirit in Glasgow, as Wallace ties to everywhere basically, but whether or not they're true. But I want to get back to just two things that Gary was saying, David was saying, the film Braveheart. Now I need to put my hand up and admit this. Prior to Braveheart, I'd heard of William Wallace, but I was quite ignorant to the fact of who he was, and what he actually done. So once I saw the film Braveheart, it made me sort of sit up and think, well, wait a minute, there's a lot more to this guy than, just a name, or, somebody that fought the English years ago and stuff like that. And so that, I do agree with that, because it certainly made me, I'm ashamed to say as a Scotsman, I didn't know not very much about William Wallace until the thought I actually seen the film.
But to a point, Scott, that's not your fault. That's something that should be educated at schools. I mean, to me, it's part of your country. It's part of the history. You should know. Now, whether from Wallace's point of view, I would say it's something that you should learn. But there's aspects of Scottish history which isn't that great. But to me, you should still be taught it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's part of your country. It's part of your heritage. Yeah. And I say this all the time. I mean, I'm 57 years of age now. I'm a totally different person to what I was when I was 18, 19, 20. And I'm sure we all are, because you make mistakes, you learn by your mistakes, you grow older, you become wiser and all the rest of it. A country to me is exactly the same thing. Now, if you don't know where you came from as a country, then how can you move forward? Do you know what I mean? And that's to me is a bit like, as we were saying, from a political point of view. from Scottish history not being taught at schools is that if you take away the history, you're destroying that country to a certain extent. And I think that was done intentionally. You know, that people don't get, well, actually, look at Wallace, look at the Jacobites, look what happened then, look at the Massacre of Glencoe, look at the Darien Affair. This all affected how Scotland became where we're at now. But people didn't, or the Westminster government didn't want Scottish people to know that. Because then that drives your heart as to where you know your country went wrong, and then you become better and you improve. Now, Scotland isn't any different now in 2023 to what we were in 1297. Nothing's changed. You get people bought and sold for English gold and all the rest of it, and we'll run from another country. So we ain't changed very much, to be perfectly honest, which is embarrassing. From my point of view, especially.
Something interesting, because you're remarking on colonialism, and you're discussing the pursuit of every great nation that's ever been and their desire of conquest. And then after the fact, the selective historical representations of those conquests to make themselves look righteous. Our country has the same problem, but there's a history that was done by a man named Howard Zinn. It's called The History of these United States from 1776 to present. It's been on the New York bestseller for something like 20-something years, 30 years. Incredible book. It tells all the truth, all the naked truth that they don't want to hear, that they don't want to be told, all the land grabs, all the atrocities, all the murders, all the stuff that they committed in the pursuit of these United States. Well, the same thing in England. England has an incredible history. Look at apartheid. Look at everything else going on. So historically, people who turned a blind eye for the king or the queen, I'm sorry, I have no allegiance to anything like that. My allegiance is to God and only God. And that's it. Everything else is second. And so for me, looking at these events like what went on with Wallace and the suppression of Scottish people by greed of the English throne at that time, it just, I see stories. And the way that he was put down so horribly, I cannot help but think that his spirit is seeking some type of justification, some kind of justice somewhere. And that was one of the interests I had between you two gentlemen, paranormal and Wallace. And I'm going, wow. And I got to be honest with you, because of the nature of who Wallace was, he's a good guy. I'm going to find something evil to present about him in vengeance or otherwise. And I struggled with that. And then I thought about, hey, this would make a great comedy.
Oh, yes. I mean, Wallace.
For his head, he's body parts all over the place. Find somebody to help him so that he could get vengeance. Who's he going to get vengeance on? Longshanks, heir down the generations down the line, the current throne.
I think it's down to. I think a lot of it is. Yeah, I mean, from Marion Braidfoot's point of view, which is allegedly his wife, we can't prove that side of things. But the one thing that you can talk about is like his uncle who taught him to do with freedom is the best, basically. And I think that's Wallace was brought up like that. I was always brought up, even before I knew about history that much, and I've actually went out and had to find it like myself. As I said, I wasn't taught it at my school, but I've always in my heart felt that Scotland should run its own country. I've always felt that. And then obviously finding out about Wallace and then reading books about it and whatever, Nigel Tranter, like books on Wallace are like amazing because, I mean, I've got books there you can read, they're really easy. I've got other books you can read and you start at the top of the page and you go down to the bottom, you're going, who the hell were we talking about there? Because Joe Bloggs that was married to him, he was married, had an affair with her, down. You're saying, God, who are we talking about here? And it's really, really complicated. Whereas I've got other books which are really easy to read and it flows through. It doesn't give you as much, but it gives you an idea of what sort of happened. So Wallace always had that through his uncle, and so yeah, you can talk about his wife, whether that part of it's true or not, but he always felt that Scotland should be its own country. And I think the scary thing about it all, and I know it's called the Wars of Independence, and everybody sort of, I think most people that will watch the film will think that Scotland wasn't independent before Wallace, but we were. We were an independent country long before William Wallace, and we were a successfully run country well before Wallace.
It was a Bologna.
Wallace,
What was his name?
Alexander.
Yeah, some of that guy who sold out to France, made a treaty with France against Edward, and Edward got mad and went over there, and that's what started everything.
Yeah, but I think from that point of view, I just find it strange that he wasn't actually fighting for freedom as in we want it back. It was like we want freedom as in that's what we had. We were free before the third died. And I think that gets misconstrued in conjunction with the film. That a lot of people don't actually realise that we were independent at that point. Do you know what I mean? We weren't run by England and then Wallace fought for independence. We were independent before that. Wallace is an amazing character, and I do find it strange that there is only like the one film made of him, although it was a blockbuster and it was massive and it went worldwide. I mean, we go to Trim in just outside Dublin in Ireland, and if you go to Braveheart, where York Castle's there, which is in the film that Wallace invades, which is rubbish, that didn't happen. But that is Trim Castle in Ireland, and they do a thing every year where about 950 Irish people turn up to watch the film outside. We go there to give the true story, whatever. And I find it really weird because the first time we went and we were watching it, there's 950 people there, and they're all Irish except us. Though it was only 8 of us there. And when Wallace wins the Battle of Stirling Bridge, the place is going mental. I mean, people are cheering and going, "Yeah, come on, yeah, blah blah blah." And I was like going, "Some of the people are even Scottish. They're going off their trolley here. This is mental." And it was really, really good. And it's weird because of what we do. You meet like famous people and all that rubbish, and like historians and all the rest of it. But before the film started, Eric that sort of runs it said, "I've got a little surprise for you right at the start." So Mel Gibson's come on in this in this big sort of film thing and said, "Look, I'm doing a film in Australia, blah. I'm really sorry I can't make it. I'd like to say thank you to the Wallace guys for coming over from Glasgow." Right now, usually I'm not like this, right? And there was an Irish people like sort of sitting beside me, and I'm going just like knocking her like that, right? I'm going, "That's us he's talking about, by the way. See the big guy, that's us he's talking about." And she was like, "Oh, cool." And I've never done that before in my life. I mean, it was just one of those surreal moments that Mel Gibson knows who we are, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I find it, from America, Australia. I mean, the society itself, we've got guys from Argentina, Australia. I did a conversation with a guy from Israel for about an hour. Maybe studying at school, whatever. All around the world, and sometimes I need to pinch myself that it's actually pretty scary. Sometimes, how many, and even one of the events, I know Scott covered one at Cambridge Kenneth Abbey, and one of our friends stays in Liechtenstein, which is beside Switzerland, and he flew over with his friends and his family to attend that commemoration from Liechtenstein. I mean, it's miles away. Do you know what I mean? And it's because he just loves Scotland, and he'd watched Braveheart, and he got a connection with it. I think probably because Liechtenstein is quite a small country. It's quite wealthy in films, but it's quite a small country, whatever. And I think he just got that affiliation with it. And for me, it's an honour, but also quite scary that people are coming over. Our national hero, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Are there any organizations, social or otherwise, that work towards social issues like the homeless or the hungry, food drives that are around Braveheart?
But there is a reason why, though. There is a reason we're getting involved with politics again, David. I'm trying to keep away from it. You keep bringing me back to it. This is not good, son. With a lot of what, I'm trying to explain this. So with a lot of what we do, like Scotland-wise, especially to do with Wallace, we get involved with councillors, we get involved with MPs, MSPs, English Heritage, we get involved with it. Then we've actually put a plaque down in London beside where the Wallace Monument is. And I spoke to the Director of English Heritage with regards to that. So from a society's point of view, we are apolitical. So we don't get involved with politics at all. It's something we can't get involved in because Wallace.
I'm talking about feeding the hungry or
No. Yeah, no. I'm trying. Yeah. So what I'm trying to explain. What I'm trying to explain is I'm trying to explain why we don't, as a society, and why Braveheart's not involved in that. So that's the reason I'm trying to say. So we try and keep what we do apolitical. In the media and the TV over in Scotland, William Wallace, the SNP, freedom and independence, which would create a lot of the problems that we like to do if we're trying to build like monuments. We built a couple of monuments, one in Glasgow, one in Port Glasgow, of which took us 7 years because they didn't want it built because it's too Scottish, it's too SNP. So with my William Wallace hat on, we are apolitical.
Gotcha.
If you then take my hat off and I'm no longer a part of the Society of William Wallace, then yes, there's loads of things we do, if that makes sense. But if the society's involved, that side, and it's why we can, have like a crowdfunding and go Society of William Wallace want to feed the homeless. We'd get slaughtered for that, absolutely slaughtered for that. But we do it in other members or parts of other
in different ways,
Scotland, and so we do that in a different way, but not under the name of Sir William Wallace or the Society of William Wallace's name. If that makes sense, David.
Absolutely.
Craig, you're sitting there. If you're just ready to jump in there, have you got what's your take on Mr. Wallace, or you get any questions?
Well, what is interesting is listening to David and Gary, because David's also a college professor, and I felt like I had a front row seat on the history of William Wallace. And so it's one of these things I've just really enjoyed listening to the conversation. Now, Gary, with the William Wallace Society, how long has that been around and how long have you been a member? And I'm guessing, Scott, you're also a member in the society?
We're not members yet, but so we keep meaning to join. I do, honestly, Gary, we do keep meaning to join. We will get but we are proud to say we are very close with them, and we have done stuff with them, and we are going to be doing stuff with them as well. So we're not members yet, but we're moving towards that.
I've been in the society for about 30 odd years. Been convener now. I don't know, I've lost track now how long I've been convener for, but it's funny, we did a thing with COVID, and sort of one of the boys introduced me and said, Gary's been the convener for it, and I was like, going, seriously, have I? It's about 8 years, I think it is now, 8-9 years that I've been the convener now. Unfortunately, it's not something that I really particularly strive to be honest. I was quite happy working in the background and annoying people like MPs and English Heritage guys to get what we wanted. David R. Ross, that was a convener at the time, who was obviously my friend as well, suddenly passed away. So Duncan then took over, who again was my friend as well. And when we were trying to do the Bell of the Brae, when we were trying to get the monument built, Duncan said to me, listen, Gary, because of what you're doing, it would be better if you were the vice convener. It would give you a little bit more scope or authority, when you were trying to do what you're doing, if you're dealing with MPs and councillors and whatever. And then suddenly Duncan passed away, unfortunately, and unfortunately I was left the only person who was going to take it, so I took over. So, and the funny thing is, when I took it over, my two kids didn't want me to take it over because David Duncan had died, had passed away, and thought I was next. So they were like, "No, Dad, don't take it. No, don't go down that route." So it is, and I think because of David going. And Duncan was a fantastic mentor for myself. I'm quite hot-headed, I think is probably the right word I could probably describe myself. Quite tenacious and annoyed people until we got to a point of where we wanted to get to. And then when we got to that point, which then involved the press and then involved like TV crews and all that, right, Davey? This is your job, big man. This is the bit you're good at. You go and take it forward. And then obviously when Davey passed, Duncan took over that mantle, and then he obviously helped me through and mentored me with regards to how you can be diplomatic. I think is the right word. And then obviously when Duncan like sadly passed away, I'd learned from Duncan and I'd learned from Davey as well. So because of those two like giants of guides, in every sense, especially David, because like David was massive. I've changed, and that's why when I talk about a country, if you learn by your history how you change, I've changed so much. And Davy was, I know Scott unfortunately didn't meet him. If you Google Davy R. Ross on YouTube. You'll see some of his speeches. Now, Davy was massive, like William Wallace, big guy, lovely guy. I loved the big guy. But if Davy spoke, and there was a passion that you gained from how Davy spoke. I've never really heard anybody else speak like Davy before or after, for that matter. He was infectious. Do you know what I mean? And he brought things to life. Now, I had two guys that we were doing a tour, and Davey was the tour guide at the time. And two of the guys were in the pub, had heard about the tour and wanted to come along. And I was like, no. These guys are loud, they're a pain in the neck. They'll be a nightmare. They'll ruin the whole day for everybody. It'll just be, it's not going to end well. And they got on the bus, and we did it for about 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours. And they never said a word. Never said one word throughout the whole 3.5 hours. And we get back into the pub once it was finished. And we were in Cambridge, Kenniscott, which you know well. Mm-hmm. And Sweeney said to me, I actually thought, I was expecting William Wallace and Robert the Bruce to walk through the door at any point. And that's what Davey had this, I don't know, it's hard to explain, and I believe that's what William Wallace must have been like when he was speaking, was infectious to get people to believe what he was saying in such a way that it got, your heartstrings were going. And I think he must have been like that. I mean, Davey and me used to go out like a lot. I never said a word. I just shut up. And you go, big man, you talk. Or you go, just talk to me. Just talk to me about history. I don't care what it is. I'll listen to you. And he was amazing, absolutely amazing. I learned so much from Davey and Duncan, because Duncan, historically wise, was amazing. But I think it's weird, and I have said this in a couple of speeches that I've made with William Wallace. Obviously, he was murdered in 1305. And we're now in 2023. Now, the amount of people that I've actually met, William Wallace, died 700 odd years ago, that I have met purely because of William Wallace. Davy Ross I met because of William Wallace. Obviously Craig and David, like Scott, I've met you all through William Wallace, through this one person who died, murdered 700 odd years ago. So he must have had some sort of thing going there that people are still meeting each other through a guy that died 700 odd years ago, which I always find quite scary, really. Do you know what I mean? But it's true. Scott and me would probably never have met, if it wasn't for this particular character. I don't know from... Where you go, Scott?
No, I was just going to say we wouldn't have met. I'm watching time. I know there's a limited with time with Craig and David. I just want to jump to, no disrespect, guys. I just want to jump to the Wallace Trail. Craig and David, one we tell them about the Wallace Trail.
Basically what we're looking to do, get involved with a trail to do with William Wallace that maybe most people don't know about. Most guys in America around the world will know about Stirling Bridge, they'll know about Smithfield, they'll know Falkirk because of the battle. There was a battle called the Bell of the Bray in Glasgow, which we've got a monument there. We built that about five years ago now. So we're looking, Camp of Kenneth. History states that his right arm is buried in the actual abbey itself. So we're looking to try and do parts of Wallace's life that most people aren't aware of. I mean, Camp of Kenneth for me is massive because it's only from the Wallace Monument, what's got about a mile away, probably not even that.
It's not far.
And people from America will come over to Scotland on like William Wallace and on their wee history trail, and they'll go to the Wallace Monument, go to Camp of Kenneth because they're not aware of it, because it's not publicised particularly well, which I have spoke to the Wallace Monument about that to try and get that moving forward, that there is something in the actual monument itself. Again, the Battle of Falkirk, there's the Falkirk Ken, which the Society built as well. There's another like Falkirk monument where William Wallace stood on the day of the battle. So we're looking to try and do like a trail to educate people on parts of Wallace that you probably won't read or you won't know about, and you won't get it from Braveheart. So that's really the idea behind it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we're looking to do right at the start is my vice convener, Gordon Aiken, dresses up as what William Wallace would have worn in that era. Obviously, not the plaid that Mel Gibson wore. Unfortunately, he didn't wear that. That wasn't even in existence in 1297. So I've got a plaid, which is a tartan. It is the Society of William Wallace official tartan. So we're going to start it off with, this is what you've seen in Braveheart as what William Wallace would have worn, but this is not what he would have been. This is not what he would have dressed like. And then bring in Gordon dressed with the clothes that William Wallace would have worn. So we're looking to educate people in conjunction with that. So it's really more. It's an education, and it's an education of clothing, and also parts of Wallace's life that like people might not be as aware of as what they are with like Stirling, Falkirk, and like Smithfield. So that's the major bit what we're looking to try and do.
So if I could just add on to what Gary was saying, because as a Braveheart, everybody's seen the film, so a lot of people get a rough idea what Wallace did, but there's a lot of people out there that don't realise that Wallace was everywhere, and there was a lot more to the man than just what was portrayed in Braveheart. As Gary mentioned, the Bell of the Bray, which is in Glasgow. Now, I'm a Glaswegian, and before I met Gary, I didn't even know this spot existed, this monument was there, even though it sits on in one of the necropolis, which is a kind of major cemetery in Glasgow. And I've been there quite a few times. I've been to the cemetery, had a walk about. I had no idea this monument was there. And then when Gary showed me, I did not know what it symbolised. Same as another bit of Glasgow, Rob Royston, which is in the north of Glasgow. Now I've been in Rob Royston quite a lot of times over the years, but I had no idea that is the actual where William Wallace was captured by the English in August 1305. I think it was the 5th of August.
Third, oh, you stop Googling stuff. It's the 3rd of August.
I'm not Googling.
Google says the 5th. It's definitely the 3rd, mate.
The beginning of August. 1305.
Quick question. Are there any documents or anything of that nature that have been preserved that come from that era, that time, that discuss the conditions of the time, such as logs or any type of diaries that a king or anybody from Scotland, England, anybody that might have.
The letter,
Scotland, no. Scotland, no. England, the only thing that I'm aware of is there is a transcript to Wallace's trial.
Oh, the
There
trial
is that,
transcript?
yeah, there is that. I'm sure I've got it somewhere. To be honest with you, the only two things that
I
we've
didn't think he
actually
got a trial because he wasn't a
Well,
citizen, so he never claimed allegiance to the king. So all they looked at him was just somebody who was an enemy, and that's why they caught him and just did him in. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but that's my
there's a word for that.
Gary will correct me if I'm wrong. Probably. Once he was captured, his fate was more or less sealed as soon as he was captured, and he was transported to London, and I think it was more of a kind of formality, a mock trial.
It was a show trial. Basically, it was a show trial, and the other thing that most people aren't aware of when you see the murder scene there. So Smithfield, which is where he was murdered, is in St Bartholomew Church, which is sort of where the plaque is. Now there is a fair in England, and it's called St Bartholomew's Fair. Now William Wallace was the main event. His murder at St Bart's was the main event. That was the highlight of, obviously barbaric times in those days. Usually as if you want a main event, you go for a meal, and then you might go to the cinema or something like that. But in those days, like Wallace's murder that's basically when he gets captured. That's what was there. Now most people aren't aware of that. In conjunction with that, it wasn't a trial as such. I mean, it was a trial where you go to trial where you're getting found guilty. End of. It doesn't make any difference. End of. You're guilty, mate. You're the best players in the world. You're gone. So it was a show trial from England's point of view, and it just shows. I find it weird. You'll probably know this from America as well, with propaganda. Of the propaganda at the time, from Wallace's point of view, is Wallace should have been kept in the Tower of London. So he arrived in England on the 22nd of August, and he was getting tried on the 23rd and murdered on the 23rd. On the 22nd, he should have went to the Tower of London, and they couldn't get him there because it was just full of a mob of English people wanting to kill this traitorous Scottish person, whatever. And he was he was kept in Fenchurch Street, and then taken to Westminster the next day. So the propaganda aspects of who William Wallace was, from an English point of view, it's quite scary to say that ain't changed. That's that part of propaganda to win wars or to gather over the media or to get over to the people. That side of things has never ever changed. It was going on in those days just as much as what it's going on now. And I think that's why I think Wallace is so interesting, because nothing's changed basically. Your propaganda in Scotland, England, and like bought and sold for English gold and betraying your country for more money. Things ain't changed really. Do you know what I mean? And it's scary.
So just what were the letter of conduct?
The safe conduct letter. So basically, the safe conduct letter. It's something that that took me 7 years of my life to get that back to where it belongs, which is in Scotland. It was in a draw in England since 1305. Now, basically, what the safe conduct letter is, the easiest way to try and describe it nowadays, it's like a passport. So it was basically a letter from the French king giving authority of like a passport for William Wallace to go and see the Pope of Rome, who was obviously the head guy in that time, to plead for Scotland's freedom. That was on William Wallace when he was captured in 1305, and as I said, it's been in a draw in London since that date.
Wow.
We end up finding out about it. They made a mistake of putting it on the internet, which they should never have done. It was taken down within a day, but we got I never took screenshots. That's above my pay grade, doing screenshots, something computery stuff. So one of the boys took a screenshot of it, and then Davy Ross, as I said before, who was the convener, sadly passed, Davy started the campaign to get that back. And when Davy passed away, I took the baton on to make sure I get it back for Scotland, for Wallace, because it's where it should be, and also because my friend started it off, and that came back to Scotland about 6 years ago now, and that took us 7 years to get that back.
Oh, wow.
And I know so that letter is really important. You've then got a Lubeck letter, which is in Germany, in Lubeck, and that was sent by William Wallace and Andrew de Moray after the Battle of Stirling Bridge, which basically what it says is Scotland's free and we're open for business. So again, that to me shows Wallace as an intelligent man looking for trade and not just like a fighting man. And I think that shows another aspect of him. Now, the Lubeck letter has been in Scotland. I'm fortunate that when the Wallace letter first came back and it was on display, the Lubeck letter came over. And I was fortunate because we get invited to the Scottish Parliament, and I met the two people who actually look after the actual Lubeck letter. And it was amazing speaking to them. They know the importance, they know how much it means to the people of Scotland and also to the people of Lubeck as well. And we've never asked for that back because, William Wallace wrote it to the people of Lubeck. So to me, it's theirs. It was sent to them, so it says. But they look after that exactly the same way. And it was a pleasure speaking to the two guys that are in charge of it, if that makes sense, because they know the importance of that particular letter. That's only two real major letters that we are aware of. There is a script somewhere, and I'm sure if you go on Google, David, I'm sure you'll find it on Google as well. But it was a sham trial, mate. It was a sham trial. Wallace could have had the best lawyers in the world, whatever, and he was still getting done, basically.
Interesting conversation and information. Thank you so much. It's
a pleasure.
I really enjoyed talking with you today, and
that's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, good seeing you again. I hate to run off, but I got an appointment I got to be at, and I'm right now. I'm watching the clock here, but it's all good. No offense. I hate.
David. I'm scheduled for but I'll hold on to you, Gary, after we come off of that. It's all right, but. Well, I think Wallace is such a vast subject. I think we need to do a part two. Maybe it's such a big subject.
I agree.
Craig, I'll mail you. I'll throw you some dates over. We can get another rendezvous organised. I do appreciate you coming in. I know
thank you guys.
Well, you gave me a great idea for a film and a plot. I wrote it out as we were talking. It just popped up, and that's the way I kind of do things. A word will trigger something or looking at something. So I enjoyed myself so much today talking with you. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you, guys.
That was a pleasure.
Okay.
Bye-bye, David.
Bye-bye, all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll hang on to you, Gary, because we're still live. So, just before we close, I was going to say close up. We're not a shop, you know what I mean? Just to give back, we were at Loudon Hill last weekend. There, what a day! But the weather was amazing for it. That was one thing.
You're lucky, mate. You're lucky. Every time I've been there, it's chucking it down, or it's sleeting, or it's snowing, or it's blowing a gale, and it's absolutely freezing. See, when I looked at the weather when I was working, I was like, I can't believe this. This is no good. It's a wonderful. The monument itself is amazing. I mean, it's an absolutely amazing monument. And again, like Loudon Hill, I mean, for me, from the commemoration point of view, a lot of the ones that we do, we lost. So it's actually quite good to go to one that we're actually 2-0 up, basically, because like Bruce won a battle and so did Wallace there. So it's always good to go to commemoration that we've got something to celebrate, I suppose, to a certain extent. So
Actually won one, but see, I was
we
there
won two, mate.
that there'd been two battles there. Obviously, we knew about the battle with Robert the Bruce, but I didn't know that Wallace had that. Was he described it at the weekend a skirmish?
Yeah, it's a skirmish, mate. Aye, a skirmish. A good old Scottish word.
It was whether it was a skirmish or not, it was a battle nonetheless. You know.
No, at the end of the day, and he won, and again, I think, like Sir Wallace, like every small, whether it's a skirmish battle or whatever else, brings more followers up. Oh, by the way, did you hear we beat Bladdy Bad whatever? And also the one thing which it always annoys me, especially with I read something on Twitter today. Some British nationalist was talking about Scottish nationalism. We need to teach more Scottish history at schools and all that. And I said, well, you should teach more like World War II history, mate. Then you would think that England and Britain won the Second World War on their own, because that's not true. But I think I forgot what I was going to say now. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think the history side of these things. I think it's important that people know. And I'm sorry, mate, I forgot. I've totally lost track. Usually I'm quite good at going off track and then coming back again. But I can't mind what I'm going to say there.
I've done myself many times. I'll go way off track, or I'll forget what I'm talking about, and you just kind of stop, you know. And I was actually talking to Liam Sharp about that.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It annoys me where talking about Wallace, talking about Bruce, you're anti-English. Anybody that I mean, I think what the guy said was, if you watch Braveheart, you're anti-English because you've watched the film, whatever. But what I look at it is, if the Spanish had invaded us, would that have made us anti-Spanish then? I mean, at the end of the day, England invaded us. We didn't invade England. So it's not a matter of being anti-English. You're anti the person that has actually invaded your country and killed your fellow countrymen. Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that's whether it's Spanish, English. We don't hate the Vikings. They invaded Scotland. We don't hate Italy. The Romans came and invaded Scotland. We don't hate them, but because it's England, we'll use it, and that really, really annoys me, because it's got nothing to do with that. It's not. You're not watching it going, "Oh, I hate the English, so I'm going to get out and stab an English guy with it." Like that. It's just part of what happened, and it just happened to be it was England that invaded us at that time, as did the Vikings, as did the Romans. But we don't hate them, or it's not portrayed that we hate them as such. I mean, I lived in England for 7 years, and most of the guys there can't stand the French because of the battles through the French. But does that mean that they hate the French? Do you read that in the papers, whatever else? And it's something that it's always as if to me, William Wallace and what he achieved is pro-Scottish. It's not anti-anybody. It's pro what he did for his country. The same with Robert the Bruce. It's pro what he did for his country, rather than anti whoever invaded us. And I think that's a really massive point for me. And whatever we get involved in, and I find it really weird as well. And I think I've said this to you before, Scott, with English guys that we've spoke to with English heritage, with regards to the plaque that we get built down there. I'm honest with you, the guys couldn't be nicer. The guy went out with what he had to do, like to help us out. And once we got all of the permission through, and you've got to bear in mind, it's on a church, which is Grade 1 listed building, and it's the oldest church in London, and they let us put a plaque up there, like all authority, all signed in, like T's crossed, I's dotted, and because I'm in Glasgow, obviously it's in London, and I said, look, we've got the plaque. He'd agreed the words that we wanted on the plaque. He agreed the picture. Well, the picture he sort of changed his mind. The picture he wasn't happy about, right? Because he phoned me up and he said, I'd sent him the wording that that we wanted to put on it. Then I sent him the picture, and he came back in an email and he said, the wording I've got no issues with, the picture I need to speak to you. So I thought, oh God, this is going to be interesting then. So he phoned me up and he said, I'm a wee bit dubious about the picture here, Gary. I'm going, how? What's wrong with it? And he went, it's a bit gruesome. And I went, aye, but I can't change the course of history, mate. That's what you done. Seriously, how can I change something that happens? And he just burst out laughing. And went, aye, you're right. And then what he did was I sent the plaque to him. He got the plaque put up for us and everything. So, so for me, it's not an anti. It's a massively pro Scottish thing, and I think that's something that's really, really important because it does wind me up. This anti-English thing because it's not there.
I think. I mean, we've certainly we've got many, friends. Are English brilliant people, and we have a laugh and a joke. You're English, you're miserable. You're Scottish, you're tight-fisted. The usual, but at the end of the day, it's banter. In Wallace's case, it wasn't. This is what I was going to say during the show. He gave his life, but it wasn't for riches. It wasn't for power. It wasn't for to get all these women or whatever personal gain or whatever. It was for something, as you say, that we already had, Scotland already had, and it might seem a stupid comparison, but it's along the same lines. If somebody comes into your back garden, that you don't know, and they don't belong there, you want them out.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's the same kind of thing. Scotland is our country, their country. Then the English decide we're going to go into their back garden. We've not been invited or nothing, and the Scottish basically say, no, we don't want you here. Go away, basically. Yeah. And and they never took the hint. And obviously, Wallace said, no, I'm not having this. I want him out of my garden, basically. It might sound a stupid comparison, but it's along the same kind of lines, I think.
No, it is, and I've said this before as well, and I've done it at Camberth Kenneth when I made a speech there, and it's like always try and think what Wallace would have felt like when he was getting murdered. Obviously, I know it was going to be painful. No, I don't mean it like that, but I wonder, where would you have been? And Davy R. Ross came up with a great saying. People called Wallace a failure because he didn't obviously achieve what he was looking to do. Do people call Jesus a failure? No, they don't. And I think if Wallace could look back on, or I know obviously you can't do things like this, but if Wallace was looking down now and seeing like the society doing, getting the monuments built up, the plaques, we're doing the talks, we're doing shows with yourself, Scott. We're looking after the Wallace Oak, and with what's going on with the independence movement as well. It's me talking about politics again. I think he'd feel a lot better that he didn't fail in what he was trying to achieve. But I think when he was getting hung, drawn, and quartered, that must have been in the back of his brain that I'm going to pass away here, and I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I think that's the one lasting bit of what he was thinking, like when he was getting murdered at the time. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I won't even talk about the pain, because the pain would have been absolutely out of this world and over 10 whatever, but he must have thought that he'd failed. And I think that's the one thing that always lives with me. And I have said this before as well, when we do vote for independence and the commemorations that we go to, it would be great to go to them and be there and say, you didn't die for Scotland's freedom for nothing. We are free again. And I think that's something which means a lot to me, because you can say what you like about Wallace or who he fought against or whatever, but Wallace and the boys that fought with him and the girls that fought with him died for Scotland's freedom. Basically, bottom line, that's what they died for. They died so Scotland could be a free country. And I sort of feel, to a certain extent, in this day and age, that we've let them down a bit. They put their lives on the line so we could have a country that we can be proud of. And then when push comes to shove and we get a referendum where you don't need to get out, you don't need to put your life on the line, you just need to put a little X in the right place, and we bottled it, I think. And that disappoints me for the likes of Wallace and Bruce, and not so much Wallace and Bruce, but the people that fought and died for them, and they fought and died for their country. And if you take away Wallace out of the equation, would Bruce have done what he did? Don't know that. We can have an argument about that. But Scotland, without Wallace, mate, would be part of Northern Britain. We wouldn't be a country. We wouldn't have a country of Scotland. We'd just be part of Northern Britain. And I think that's why Wallace is so important to the Scottish people.
I think, I mean, it's interesting when he was lying there, and they were doing whatever, what was going through his head, did he think he'd failed or had he succeeded? I mean, one thing, I don't ever know what is what in his mind, maybe he had a different goal to what people think he did. It's why, who knows? But the fact is, as you say, if Wallace hadn't did what he did, would Bruce have, fought at Bannockburn? Would he have led an army if it hadn't been for was Wallace?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. We'll never know that. I mean, don't get me wrong. When Wallace was murdered in 1305, King Robert the Bruce was made king in 1306. But again, would he went down that route, or would he just done a deal with Longshanks, which he had done previously? In fairness, would he have done a deal and then So we'll never really know that. That's more on a conjecture. But I think for me, it's why Wallace is not more important. That's not the right word. But more of an influence in my life, I would probably say a better way, is that without Wallace, we might not, as I said, be a country. We might just be part of Northern Britain. And I think that's why he is so important to Scotland. And I think with what David was saying tonight as well, with the knight side of things, but a knight in Scotland in those days didn't really have a lot of authority. As such, he didn't have the authority to get an army like starting off as a king or a clan chief did. So for Wallace to do that, I think, is massive. And the Lubeck letter that we're talking about as well, where he's then got the intelligence and the foresight to send a letter to Germany to say that Scotland's free for trade again. Like, bearing in mind, it was just after the battle itself. Andrew de Moray was seriously ill with wounds that he suffered, and again, from a history point of view, we're not great in that one. We don't know when Andrew de Moray died, whether it was like straight after the battle or like a couple of weeks later. We're not really sure about that one. But he must have had that on his mind. Obviously, the amount of people that had died in the battle itself. To then have the foresight to go and then write a letter to say, like, Scotland's free and he's thinking about Scotland's future with trade and whatever else, I think says a lot about him. It says a lot about his character, and I think that's something that sometimes we forget about in conjunction with him. It's just more the fact, he won the Battle of Falkirk, he lost the Battle of Falkirk, he won the Battle of Stirling, what a tremendous fighter he was, blah, 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 blah. But to get to that stage and then what he did after that, and then also after losing the Battle of Falkirk, resigning the guardianship of Scotland because he felt for the amount of people that had died on that particular day. As I said, I think it shows the type of character that he was. Obviously, after that, we don't really know what happened to him. With the safe conduct letter, I'd love to know whether he went to Rome or not. But we'll probably never ever find that out. The only place that we'd ever get that is the Vatican. I know we have tried, but we didn't really get very far, if I'm totally honest with you. But he did, as far as we're aware, he possibly did go to Rome. He definitely went to France to get the king, the French king to get on Scotland's side as well. So he was always believing, so from a diplomatic point of view, he was good at that, whether he stayed the Pope or whether he didn't. The French king thought he was the type of person that we should have an audience with the Pope. So I think the whole of that shows you that he wasn't just like a fighting man, Scott. There was a lot more to William Wallace, and again, because we shouldn't know who he is, he should have been a monk. And I've said this to you before as well, which is, and I do get frustrated with Wallace at times, is that we don't have that much accurate historical wise that we can say, that we can prove a lot of what we get. Although we do go down like English heritage and read Blind Harry's book and go, the English guys are saying like Wallace was here, and you can go, well, that's in Blind Harry's book, so that bit's right. But the rest of it does make it a lot more difficult to piece together his life. I mean, to a point, I believe he was born in Elderslie in Renfrewshire. There's people that will talk about he was born in Renfrewshire in Ayrshire, although Elderslie at the time in Ayrshire wasn't even like a city or a town at that point. It wasn't even invented. So I find that hard. But we don't even know like when he was born. I mean, we know he was born between 1270 and 1274, but we don't know a date.
Mm-hmm.
So he can be frustrating at times, Scott. I think so.
There's a lot of the history very kind of vague, and there's gaps here and there, and there's nothing to fill those gaps in, if you know what I mean. So it can be frustrating when you're trying to piece together somebody's life, but there's bits and pieces missing, and you've got nothing to go on.
We just need to hope at times. I mean, with the Lebec letter, there's a little. I'm trying to think where my mic is. There's a little like stamp on it, which is Wallace's stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was found in Lebec, they just looked at the front of the stamp. They didn't look at the back of the stamp. And then 2 years later, somebody turned it round and then found that his dad wasn't Malcolm. His dad was Alan Wallace's. And it's just things like that. Then we know Wallace went to Pierrefonds, I don't say it right, in France, where we believe he was given the safe conduct letter. But we know when we were trying to get the safe conduct letter back, the French had part of their archives. They've lost that bit of paper,
mm-hmm.
which would 100% prove that Wallace was there at that point. So they've lost that. But then in saying that, and I know this for the fact that when we were checking on the Scottish archives for things to find William Wallace, there was a couple of letters that were found which didn't make any sense, and it wasn't part of Wallace. But they knew where it should have been. And when they put it to different other parts, that made sense to that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always the hope that one day in the French archives, somebody's looking for someone and finds that little bit that we're looking for and go, oh, that's to do with William Wallace. So you just got to hope with things like that. But I know the French guys were still looking for it the last time that I was in contact with them, and they still haven't found anything yet. But they are still on the lookout for it, and if we find it, then if we find it, that is the safe conduct letter. I'm 99% certain it was in Wallace his possession when he was captured. If we get the letter from Pierrefonds, as I said, I don't say it particularly well. That would 100% prove that letter was given to William Wallace, and at that point, I would then go down the route to try to get it back, not just on loan, but as a permanent part of Scotland, basically.
There's still plenty of time to try and find that, the missing link, of every like, the missing. It is. There's still plenty of time, but I think we'll wind it up there. But I'll hold on to you a wee minute after we come off, if that's all right, bud. So that's it for today. I like to make it clear that tonight's show was not a political show in any way. It was just sheerly about Craig and Dale were very anxious to learn about William Wallace. So that's the reason we're doing this done tonight. And we're going to do a part 2 because, as we said earlier on, Wallace is the story's just that complex and massive You can't do it in an hour or an hour and 10, 15 minutes, whatever. So we will be doing a part 2 with Craig and David. But I just want to make it clear that, because you know what Facebook is like, you're always going to get somebody who'll say, oh, they were being political and blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. Tonight was not political in any way. We have got many, many English friends who we love dearly, and we were just talking about William Wallace. You know what it's like, Gary? There's always going to be one nitpicker who'll say, oh, they're anti-English, they were, beware. We want to make that clear. But we're back on Sunday. We have a very special event on Sunday. I'm going to plug it in now, Gary, while we're on. This coming Sunday at Hunterston Castle, which is in Ayrshire, just outside of, I can never say that, the name, Skilmorley. I say that right? Skilmorley.
I think so. Oh, you're asking the wrong person here, mate. I'm telling you. It sounded good to me, buddy. It sounded good to me.
It's just outside Skilmorley in Ayrshire. Hunterston Castle is unveiling the Wallace Oak. Now, for those who don't know the Wallace Oak, I'm going to tell you what, and Gary will probably chin me if I get it wrong. It's reported to be the remainder of the tree that Wallace himself was chained to after his capture by the English. Am I right?
Yeah.
I'm right.
Just one, and I'm rubbish at this. And we're talking about like naming things because like Neil was laughing at me last night as well. When we get gifted the oak, and we obviously sold bits of it off, which you can buy it on eBay. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to raise money to obviously build the actual monument that we built in Port Glasgow, which was, I think it was about 18 grand, I think it was in the end. But we didn't want to just sell it on like legend.
Mm-hmm.
So we got in contact with one of my historian friends to see if she knew anybody, and she got us in contact with Curly Mills, who's a dermatologist or something like that, or dermatology or something. But basically, she's an expert on trees. Basically, that's what it is. It begins with a D, right? But she's an expert on trees. And she studied the tree and she took parts of it, and she basically confirmed 99% certain that tree would have been the tree that William Wallace was captured or tied to. So that's why when we sold it on that basis that it was true, with a certificate from Dr. Mills confirming that she has confirmed that tree is old enough that there's a very, very good chance that was a tree that William Wallace was captured to. So we didn't just sell it on the off chance on Legend States. That one we did go out of our way to actually prove it.
You did your homework on it.
Aye.
Which is it's a good it's a good thing to do if the chance is there, the opportunity is there to do it. Then do it, because I mean there's a lot of out there these days that people just claim stuff and they've no backing whatsoever. They just say it and that's it. So it's good to use it if you've got the opportunity to back it up or whatever to use it. But that's this Sunday, folks. We've been invited by the Society and by Clan Hunter to cover it live, which we're really looking forward to. So we're going live about 1:30 on Sunday. I think it's 1:30 to 5. Now the only downside of it is we were down at the location a couple of weeks ago and we met the lovely Janet, who's a tour guide there, and she gave me a walk around the castle and the oak room as well. The only downside is inside the actual room itself, there's no signal at all.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, mate. It doesn't surprise me.
And in the shop, there's a signal. I think it's one of the upstairs rooms, there's a slight signal. But in the actual oak room itself, it's dead, pardon the pun. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to record the actual unveiling itself, and then we'll upload it onto the page. We're trying to think of other ways around it, and there's no any other way around it. So one is you're going to have to record it, and then it'll be uploaded. So there'll be about a 10-minute delay or something like that in uploading it to the actual page. There's no other way to do it. So we'll be live for about 1:30, and you'll probably see this man there, probably a word with him. and we're hoping to talk to some people for Clan Hunter, sorry, Clan Hunter, and also involve the public in it. See if we can get, a wee word or two from members of the public. As far as we know, the event's sold out. So
it's sold out, yeah.
There should be quite a few bodies there. So we're going to hope to get the public involved in as well. I just get their thoughts on the whole ceremony, basically. So that's on Sunday. For about 1:30, we'll be live till 5, to the end of the ceremony anyway. But massive thanks to, I keep going that, I don't know why. You're doing that. Now, we've done over 500 of these, and I still get the point bit right.
Still got it wrong.
That is a tree. Do you know what I mean? A big thanks to Gary for coming out on Sunday, and a big thanks to David and Craig for coming on, and we shall be talking again to them soon on part 2. And so until Sunday, folks, enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting, and we'll see you on Sunday, hopefully. So take care for now. Bye.
This is there, folks. Cheerio.